This is the Civil Liberties Research Paper Conference. At the top of our research guide posted on the class webpage, we have the topic. The Constitution states in both Article 1 and in the Fifth Amendment that the government has the right to temporarily suspend some civil rights and liberties during a time of war. Should the United States change this policy? Choose three of the following wars to prove your argument. World War I, World War II, Cold War, which is referring specifically to the Second Red Scare, the Vietnam War, or the War on Terror. If your answer is no, the United States should maintain this policy, then you must find evidence that proves that suspending rights and liberties historically has been justified and necessary for the overall good of the nation or the national security of our country. If your argument is yes, the United States should change this policy, then you must find evidence that proves that suspending rights and liberties historically has not been necessary to protect national security. I want to give you a little bit more specific example of something that you would be familiar with that helps you understand what you're trying to do in this particular paper. If we go down to the body paragraph section and you look at this third bullet point here, here is basically what you're trying to decide. You're determining if do the ends justify the means? In other words, do suspending civil rights and civil liberties justify, because the end result is that the protection of all American citizens has happened. So, for example, we, of course, during World War II talked about Japanese internment. If you were to do a paragraph on World War II, Japanese internment would be one of the things that you would talk about. You would need to assess, was Japanese internment necessary for national security? Did Japanese internment effectively protect the safety of all Americans? So it's either yes, Japanese internment was necessary, that it made sure that there were no Japanese spies in the United States, or the counter would be no, that suspending the civil rights and civil liberties of Japanese Americans through internment wasn't necessary, that there were no Japanese spies that were found. So that is what you're trying to do for all these wars, and you're trying to figure out different examples that prove your particular argument. So let's go ahead and let's look at the research that you need to do. One of the first things that you need to do is actually define the terms civil rights and civil liberties. Now, besides doing research for your body paragraphs, you're also going to have to do research for your introduction. And in that introduction, you are going to have to provide cited definitions of these two terms. Note, you cannot use an online dictionary. An online dictionary is a web page, so you need to use a paper dictionary. We have plenty of copies in the library, or you can use a database to define these terms. You should create note cards for these terms with the proper citation information. You need to understand what civil rights and civil liberties mean, since that is the overall theme of this particular topic. Is it okay to suspend them or not during a time of war? So you need to know what they are in order to identify them when you're doing your research. Okay, in terms of other elements of the introduction, there are some other key components that you're going to need to discuss in your introduction. Towards the end of the research paper, we will come back to these. But as you're doing research for the body paragraphs, don't forget that you also need to do research for your introduction. So let's talk a little bit more about the body paragraphs. You're going to be choosing 3 eras to begin your research. If you scroll down to the bottom of the research guide, you can see the eras that you can choose from. We have World War I, World War II, the Cold War, which is, again, primarily focusing on the Second Red Scare, the Vietnam conflict, and the War on Terror. Generally speaking, I would recommend that you probably do World War II or World War I as one of your paragraphs, simply because you have prior knowledge on both of those. You don't have to, it's just a recommendation. It'll be a little bit easier for you, especially when you're starting the research. Remember that this is a Tier 2 topic. It's a Tier 2 topic simply because the research can be a little bit more intense and the organization of your paper doesn't fit into the cookie cutter mold of our traditional formula. So I would recommend starting again with either World War I or World War II, or maybe you choose both, just simply for their familiarity. Then you also have these other choices: Cold War, Vietnam, War on Terror. The Vietnam conflict you can absolutely do. It's probably one of the more challenging topics to try and find good evidence for either argument. So you are more than welcome to, but I just want to put that little warning out there for you. Now you'll notice underneath all of these wars, I have a list of terms. These terms are just ideas to get you started on your research. These are terms that you can simply plug into a database in the search engine, or you could also get a book on these different eras in history, like a World War I book, and in the back of the book, look up these terms in the index. Again, these are ideas. You don't have to use these. It's just something to get you started with your research. Note, some of these terms and examples show that suspending civil rights and liberties is necessary. Some show that it's not necessary. So I'm just throwing out a whole bunch of terms to you to help you get started on your research. Now, when you go to write your paper, you cannot just focus on one of these terms. In other words, if you're doing the World War II paragraph, you cannot just talk about Japanese internment 3 times. You would need 3 unique examples of civil rights or civil liberties being suspended that prove your particular argument, that it was legitimate and necessary or not necessary. So these are just like our body paragraphs we've written all year. You can't say the same thing over and over. You need 3 unique pieces of evidence for each of these paragraphs that you choose. And again, you're choosing 3 of these topics, only 3. So you have some flexibility and some choices. If you're doing the War on Terror, I highly recommend that you actually use a article that's posted on the class website as a starting place before you do any outside research. So let me go ahead and pull up the class webpage for a moment. So on the class webpage, if we scroll down to U.S. History Readings and click on that and go all the way down to this War on Terror and this American Ideals Today, these 2 readings, which obviously we haven't gotten to yet, they're our last 2 readings of the year. If you click on those, what you're going to see are different examples of ways in which civil liberties have been suspended over the course of the War on Terror thus far. And those will give you a good idea on whether you want to actually do your paragraph on this particular time period. So I recommend that you start there if you're interested in that particular topic. Now you will need citation information, of course, to create your note cards as well as to create your source list. So I want to show you where to find that for both those readings. It's actually the same. So let me go ahead and go back up to the top of the class webpage. And we're going to go down to the U.S. History Research Paper tab and click on that. And then we're going to go to what's called Works Cited or MLA. So right here, this top one says Source Information for Select Online Class Readings. If you click on that, there's going to be a Word document that you're going to open up. And in that Word document, you are looking for the name of the online reading that you are using. So if we go down here, we have this American Ideals Today reading. So it tells you the author's name is Goff. There are page numbers on this reading. So on your note cards, it'll be Goff with the page number. Now you also need the rest of the source information. So if you keep scrolling down, you can see here is Goff. You will simply copy and paste that whole entry into your source list. And that is the source information that you'll need for your source list and your Works Cited page. Okay, let's go back to the research guide for a moment. I also, you can see, have pages in the textbook that can help you that have information about all of these different wars and time periods. Note that the textbook does not count as one of your 5 sources. It would be a 6th source. That online reading that I showed you actually does count, though, as one of your 5 required sources. So again, if you're going to do that last topic on the War on Terror down here, then that's a really good place for you to start your research with. Okay, so we are now down here, the second to last portion of the body paragraphs. It says, in part A of your analysis, you're going to need to define or explain the policy. So while you're doing research, there's kind of 2 things you're doing. One of the things that you're doing is simply taking notes on what these things are. What was the War Industries Board? What was the National War Labor Board? The second thing that you're doing is looking for your quotes. And your quotes or your evidence should be about the effectiveness of the policy. In other words, did the War Industries Board okay, in its suspension of civil rights or civil liberties actually protect the American public. So that's what you would be looking for. Okay? Statistics are going to be important for this particular one. If you can find statistics about how many guilty parties were found or how many people were helped by this particular law, then of course that will help you. It may not be easy to find, but those would be really amazing evidence quotes that you could find for your paper. As you're working on this topic, if you have questions, please make sure that you do come and talk to me about those, either in class when we're working on the paper. You can always send me an email if you have questions. And of course, I will have access sessions where we will be focusing on the paper that you are more than welcome to sign up for, and I can help you at those points. Good luck.